On Easter morning, on April 12th, we weren't able to gather together to celebrate and worship the Lord. And so Easter started out as a somber day, and throughout that day, we were just missing our church family, having to worship through live stream. And that evening was an evening like any other, and yet at around 10 o'clock, my wife pulled me aside. I didn't even realize there was a storm coming through. We had no real warning about what was happening. But at around 11 o'clock at night, we heard the beginnings of the thunder, the rumbling. We had gathered in a hiding place in our house, and we'd taken shelter in a place where we could stay safe.
The flashing lights was the lightning. It looked like a strobe light, and that scared us, and we knew this was real this time. So we ran down, went to the bathroom that we have. The one side of our house is about 2/3 underground, so we'd always planned to go there. Once we got in, we sat down, and then that's when we started hearing the noise. We heard a large sonic boom, felt the pressure change. We all jumped into the shower and huddled there. There was no terror, there was fear because of the unknown and what was going on. But my husband said the verse that came to mind immediately was Proverbs 18:10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The man that runs to it is safe. So he kept claiming that verse while we were in the shower, and I was just praying for protection over us.
My husband had said, I think I'm gonna just go ahead and go to bed. And he said, but I want to watch the news first. I want to see what the weather is looking like. So we had the news on, and then all of a sudden, the lights started flickering. The wind at this point was really whipping up. We have wind chimes outside, and they were just clanging. And then all of a sudden, there was all this debris that was hitting our windows. And I said, baby, please come on. Please, please hurry. I said, I'm so scared. And all of a sudden, I just started humming, It Is Well With My Soul. And I was like, baby, come on. And we got over in our safe place, and I just started singing it.
We stayed up pretty much all night just trying to reach people, just trying to find out who was safe and who was in danger or who had been affected by the storm. We found out the next morning that at least 12 of our families in our church were displaced. Some of them had houses that were fairly destroyed or devastated, others that were only fairly damaged enough that they couldn't stay there, and that there was tons of damage throughout the entire community.
When we saw the house, we had to wait till morning. Our entire upstairs, all this roof was gone, and all the sides of the house were gone. The kitchen, one of the walls had fallen over on my grand piano. I know, my grand piano was very sad to lose, but God provided another. The kitchen was, all the walls shut together. We couldn't get in our kitchen. We had a large pantry, it wasn't even there. The one side of our house where our garage was and our car was parked inside had been scrunched together. So we really, only the side of the house that we were in was not harmed.
The next morning at sunrise, I went out, and we did have a tree from front to back that had gone through the house because we have a 2-story home. And then we had about 6 trees on the front of our house. We couldn't get out the front door. We had come to find out about 35 other trees that had fallen in our yard and into our neighbors' yards. But thankfully, no one in our neighborhood was injured. So we were very blessed.
So Monday morning after the tornado, our first step was to walk the neighborhood where we live and ask our neighbors, some of whom were elderly, to assess the damage. I got in my car and drove not too far because power was out everywhere. It was really incredible how many people lost electricity, and wires were across the road. And so within hours at my church, which is First Presbyterian Church of Chattanooga, we were calling to find out who had need and how could we fill the need. So one of my first thoughts was to reach out to Mission North America's disaster response team. And I know we have a regional director for the Tennessee and Georgia, Alabama and Georgia area. His name's Mike Kennemer. And so I think there are probably a half a dozen or so people in this area who had the same thought. Let's get a hold of disaster response, M&A's disaster response, and see what we can do.
At the M&A Disaster Response Warehouse here in Rome, Georgia, we pre-position supplies, equipment, and tools that will be needed to respond to disasters anywhere across the United States. So if a disaster happens, or actually when it happens, we have all the things that we need prepared to send out to the people there on the ground.
And so we started from that point, from that morning on Monday, and every day since, kind of arranging these work crews. And people would show up and we would go out and we'd spend the morning chopping down trees that were slanted, or cleaning up trees that had fallen, trying to get people or their things, their cars in some cases, out of their homes. And we really just tried to help whoever we came across, whether they were from our church or neighbors, and sometimes trying to get through neighborhoods and help them so we could get as well to our members. But it was amazing to see how God used this, how God was active even in those early moments, because people were responding with opportunities to serve and wanting to come with chainsaws from all over our church body.
You really see the body of Christ in so many ways. People were coming to cut trees. Even if they stayed an hour, they were coming. And everybody has their God-given gifts. And they used them in such a mighty way through all of this. One day we had this mother and her son. She came in and she said, "Sally, what can I do for you?" And I was like, I just really don't know. She goes, "Do you have a broom?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "Let me sweep your floors." So she swept the floors. It was the least of my concern, but it was her concern for me. She said, "I can do this. This is something I can do." So she swept up the floor and it looked beautiful, and it was like, Lord, He just gave us this friend who wanted to sweep our floors.
One of the ways that God provided was through the Mission North America provided these sheds for us, because we had to get everything out. I don't know what we would have done with all our stuff, but we were able to get it out in time and get it moved into there thanks to these sheds. And so we're still got stuff in there to this day, 5 months later.
I strongly believe that that good theology has good ministry attached to it. That God has called us to be His hands and feet and His embodiment in some regard when we're out doing ministry. We don't do ministry for ministry's sake. We do ministry for the glory of Jesus Christ, for the opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed.
I have been able to share our experience and to share the support that God's people gave us. I've shared it with the neighbors who weren't involved in church, who were amazed that at our home there were people every day helping, and they're like, "Where did all these people come from?" And I said, "God's people." Our church, our fellow homeschoolers were there. So yes, we've been able to share that. I shared it with the lady at the vacuum place when I ran to buy a vacuum, just telling her, she was like, "I'm so sorry you had to go through this." And I said, "We're fine. We have so much help. Our church, our homeschool families, our friends, God has provided all the help that we needed."
M&A Disaster Relief was extremely helpful in our process of figuring out what to do. We had never been through a tornado or crisis. None of our pastors had really experienced what it was like to see our community devastated in that way. So as we were trying to sort out what steps we needed, M&A Disaster Relief came in and assisted us with a number of opportunities, things from tangible needs of masks and sheds, things that we hadn't anticipated we would need, as well as advice and encouragement on how to reach out to our neighbors, how to talk to them about the gospel just simply by being present with them and loving them with tangible things like a cup of water or a sandwich while we're working together on taking out their tree from their house. So yeah, M&A disaster response was extremely helpful in helping us figure out how to think through the needs, but also what supplies and what resources we would need in order to engage the community and to care for our church well.
I think that God has really strengthened us. I mean, we've had to rely on Him and on the ways that He's choosing to provide, not on the ways that we expected. And so we've had to trust and have faith and yeah, let Him provide through the church. And people have given money to the Mercy Committee at the church, and they've been able to help with, the electric bills that are more than the insurance paid for, and things like that. And so many ways that, yeah, we've just had to trust God, and He's used His people and He's used the church to, spread His love in that way. And then that's a witness to the neighbors who see this, and things like that, where we can say, this is obviously God's hand. There's no other way to explain this than God protecting us, providing for us through His people.